Welcome to the Industry Talks podcast hosted by Lenz Studio, where we interview film industry professionals about their experiences in the industry. We'll be your host today. I'm Jelan Maxwell. I'm a DOP here in Ottawa, Canada. And I'm
Fitch Jean, a filmmaker and director. Make sure to subscribe to keep up to date and follow us on Instagram at NDTalksPod and at Lenz Studio HQ.
This episode is sponsored by Lenz Rental. Located in Ottawa, Canada, Lenz Rental is a top-tier film equipment rental house, carrying industry-standard brands like Arri, O'Connor, and Teradek. If you're looking to rent equipment for your next production, check them out at lenzrental.com. And joining us today is...
Diaz. Thanks for having me, guys.
Welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Good. How are you guys?
Very good, very good.
Great.
So, Diego, for people who might not know, would you like to give a little introduction of who you are?
Sure. So I've been in the film industry now for about 12 years, mostly in the camera department. And I've worked my way up in different roles. First, I was a trainee, then a second AC, and now I'm a first AC. Right. So on set, I'm the one responsible for not only being like the go-between between the director of photography and the camera department, but I also build and manage the camera. And then also I manage the team as well. And then when we're actually shooting, I'm the one who keeps the image in focus.
Oh, wow. Managing the team, actually. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think a lot of people consider everybody considers first AC focus puller.
So the interesting about that is focus, like the focus pulling aspect of it is actually a very small part of the job.
Interesting.
A lot of it is more, that it is a very important part of the job. If you can't do that, then you don't get hired.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is also just like in prep, for example, right now I'm prepping for a feature that I'm going into next week. And a lot of it is going into like what the DOP wants in terms of a camera package and figuring out if we can get what we need from the rental house. Right. Along with, and then on set, mostly just, like I said, managing the team, which is, the training, helping train the trainee to do second AC roles of the role. And also just making sure that like we have everything that we need on a day-to-day basis. So for example, if we're shooting outside, making sure that we have, tents to keep our gear safe. Figuring out on a day-to-day basis, like what rigs we're gonna need. Like, are we gonna be in studio orientation for most of the day? So that's like the typical camera build that we use. Or are we gonna be mounting the camera on a jib, like some sort of crane?
Sure.
Or are we gonna be Steadicam for the day? That kind of stuff. And just kind of planning ahead and ultimately just trying to make not only the process of shooting day-to-day simpler and more efficient, but making sure that the camera is always ready for the next shot.
Wow. Okay. I knew that first ACs were in charge of a lot, but you're basically kind of describing, you're in charge of basically all the equipment that's not lighting.
In terms of camera, yes.
In terms of camera.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And how did you get started? How did you have that, I want to become a camera operator, or I'm sorry, not a camera operator, like first AC.
I think a lot of it originally was just like, I started in photography, so I've always had kind of an affinity for using and being around cameras. But then I just also really like building things. So the concept of being in charge of, getting to build the camera and consistently get to rebuild it depending on what the needs of the day are. Yeah. It kind of scratches that techie part of my brain, which is nice. And it keeps things ever changing. Like no 2 days is the same. And then specifically when it comes to focus pulling, just the art of it, the fact that it's the role specifically being a focus puller or being a first AC is a very nice in between of the creative aspect of filmmaking and also the tech aspect of it, where I get to not only be part of the shot when we're recording, but then when we're not, I also get to be a tech and just play with gear all day long, which is nice. And I also get to learn a lot. I get to see different DOPs come and go, and I get to see how they light and how they use the camera in different ways and how they, use different filters and all that. And I just kind of just get to put that in my back pocket for later use.
On that note, actually, how that relationship with the DOP, can you talk about it? Like, how early on are you involved in the shot? Are you involved in the shot listing at all?
No. Sometimes I can't say no all the time, but I'm not really involved in like the planning of the shot list or anything like that. Some DOPs will share their lighting plans if you ask, if you're interested. Usually I come in probably about a week or two before the show actually starts, and I start discussing with the DOP like what lenses he wants to use, what lenses they want to use, and like what filtration they want to use, and and sometimes what camera they want to use. That conversation has become a little bit more rare. It's usually just an Alexa now that we typically go with. When I first started, it would kind of bounce between like Red and Alexa a lot. Now in the last 4 years, I think I've predominantly been on an Alexa Mini or an LF Mini, which is great. I love it. It's a fantastic camera, and I don't want to go back.
For sure. What are some of your could you talk about some like interesting productions you've kind of been on being a first AC?
Yeah, so they're all I would say they're all interesting in that they are all, like I said before, like they're always different. I'd say that the most memorable show that I worked on was a movie that we did back here in Ottawa a few years ago now. I believe it was 2015. They all blend eventually. But it was called The Black Coat's Daughter. I'm pretty sure it's viewable, I think, on some streaming site. I think it's on Amazon Prime or Crave, if I'm not mistaken. But it was the first movie I got to focus pull on, and it was very challenging because I was still very green. It was a one camera show, and a lot of the show, it was a horror movie, so it was a lot of overnights, and it was a lot of long dolly shots down hallways, like crashing into actors or pulling away from actors, that kind of stuff. So it was one of those like trial by fire shows, which definitely keeps things interesting when you're the only focus puller on set. I find that like when there are multiple cameras, the pressure is a little bit less because if, for example, you're shooting two cameras and you buzz a certain portion of the shot, depending on how they're going to cut it together, the other camera might save you. But when you're by yourself and with one camera, then you've got to try to get most of that shot in focus every time.
Right. Interesting. How is that working with the A and B team? And is there communication? How's the communication between you and the other focus pullers?
Yeah, so the way it works is it's kind of hierarchical. I just murdered that word.
We all do.
And in that the A camera team kind of runs the show. And then but there is a lot of communication in prep. The A camera and B camera focus pullers will talk, and typically, like the way I like to do it is we'll split up like specialty gear. So like, for example, if we're going into a show and I know that we're going to be doing a lot of Steadicam and we also have some crane days, then whichever focus puller is more comfortable on the Steadicam, we'll do the Steadicam. Or for example, for this next show that I'm prepping for, there's going to be a lot of Ronin use, or there might potentially be a lot of Ronin use, and I don't actually have a lot of time on the Ronin, but my fellow focus puller does. So he's going to take over the Ronin shots because he'll be able to build it faster and balance it faster than I could, just due to more time on the Ronin.
Okay, so you also do the balancing when it comes
yes.
to... Okay.
Yeah. Basically, we build balance, and then once that's done, it goes over to the operator.
Okay, that's interesting. Do you think that you're comfortable right now as a first AC, or is something that you want... There's other things you want to explore in the film world? So for now, for the foreseeable future, I'm pretty comfortable being a first. It's something I've been working towards for, I'd say, pretty seriously for the last like 10 years. And because it's in that nice little middle ground I was mentioning before between tech and creative, I think that it's something I want to focus on, no pun intended, for the next little bit, because it is. It's a very rewarding job, and it's I think I was mentioning before the show, pulling focus is very much like a video game to me. So it's no matter the day, it's always fun. Like it's always fun. As soon as that camera rolls, I'm in the zone, and that's all I'm thinking about is just keeping that shot sharp. Okay. And did you go to school for?
Yeah, so I went to Algonquin College. Okay. And I took the television broadcasting course. Okay. Which was it was a mixed bag, because at the time the course was very heavily catered toward like live studio production.
Okay.
Television. So I did learn quite a bit, but I think that the most that I got out of it at the time was just being in the right like the right environment to network and like meet people in the industry and then get myself on set. And once I was on set, I think the first time I was on set, I worked as a grip, and that was the one day I worked as a grip.
Yeah.
But the second I saw like the camera and the way the camera team was working and like what they were doing, like that's what like targeted me at that. And then it was from then on, it was get in the camera department.
What's your what is the relationship between like first, because like I've seen where grip is working on like rigs and stuff for the camera department stuff. What's that relationship that you have with the grip department?
So it's pretty hard to articulate, or at least pretty hard for me to articulate. But generally speaking, it's the relationship kind of meets where if we're rigging something like a car rig or a crane, for example, smaller cranes, because if the bigger the crane gets, then you need specialty teams to come in to run those cranes.
Oh wow!
But if we're doing like an easy jib, for example, like that would be the grips. Car rig would be the grips, or like a pipe dolly, that would also be the grips. So essentially, like they set up everything from the ground up to where the tripod head starts.
Yeah,
is I guess the best way I could describe it, right? Okay. And then as soon as they're done that, we slap tripod head on, and then the camera goes on, and then the rig is complete. And then for stuff like a car rig, once the camera's on, then they come in and they safety it down to make sure that it's not going to fly off.
Ever had any safety?
I've never, like, thankfully I've always worked, like, even when I was doing like non-union, like indie shows, I've always worked with a pretty responsible and professional team. There are things that happen, like equipment fails, but thankfully with car rigs, I've never seen anything crazy happen, which is nice. You always wonder, but I haven't seen
that one on YouTube. With the
See, I had a feeling you were going to bring that up, and
I think it's a crane or is it a Ronin?
It's a Ronin. It's a Ronin. It's a Ronin too. So the funny thing about that, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because that was what was going through my head. That's actually really funny, because it is actually kind of what we're talking about in that. So that actually was the fault of the camera team, or the camera team, because I've looked into it, and essentially they didn't really have a camera team. I think they had a focus puller maybe, and then they were just using PAs. And I kind of saw a thread of whoever they were like talk about it, in that they blamed the PA for not locking the Ronin. And so I've actually watched that video back frame by frame, because I was really curious. Wow. And you can actually see the Ronin just slide off the docking arm where it's supposed to be locked. It just slides off because it's not locked in. And that's why that happened.
Oh my
Simply because it wasn't locked. Yeah.
And the first thing you go to in your head is like the grip.
That is what some people would think.
Like, that's what I thought.
Yeah, exactly.
I saw that, but
no, that was whoever put the Ronin on. They just didn't lock it.
Camera department probably didn't say anything. They're
like,
well, I guess there wasn't really even
exactly. Well, and that's the thing, right? It depends on how those things are being run. But that is a perfect example of things not being checked, and safety either. There was no safety chain on it. There was no way to prevent it.
That's also true. Yeah, no safety chain.
You can just see like there's one video cable and it just unplugs as the camera goes.
Yeah, I think that was like the most heartbreaking moment. Like everyone that's in the industry knows that moment.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Well, there's that one, and then there's also, I don't know if you've seen the video, I'm sure you have, of the guy who, I can't remember what convention it was, but he was trying on the Steadicam rig, and he starts dancing around the arm.
I saw that one.
Snaps off, but he catches it.
Yeah, but it still falls.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bad situation.
And the arm, I think, snaps too, right?
Yeah, it's a very bad situation.
So, yeah, and those are things that stick in all of our heads.
Yeah, that's why don't dance around with your cameras. Yeah. Actually, you touched on something, union versus non-union work. Can you talk a little bit about, because I know it's a bit of a difficult process to get into the union, if I'm not mistaken.
So,
can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that specifically where we are, it's a bit more difficult for grip and electrics to get into their union. Don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure, but we're actually lucky in Ontario in that the camera union that we have here actually has a trainee program. It's actually pretty rare. That's not a thing that exists in a lot of other places. So the process of getting in is a bit trickier. Here, if you get a little bit of experience in the indie world, in the camera department specifically,
right.
Or you go to school for something related, you can apply to get in. And the way it works is you apply. If you get in, then you get placed on a show. You get placed on, 6 shows. And then you're evaluated. every show, and then at the end you can apply to become a second AC. And you get, and the cool thing about that is that as you're getting placed for those 6 shows, not only are you learning the job, but you are also building that network of people that will potentially hire you once you've gone through. Yeah.
Is that how you came?
Yeah, that's how I did it. I mean, I started, so I got in the indie world and instantly just started pulling focus. And I think I might have done maybe 7 or 8 features, like indie features, like pulling focus before I decided to join the union, because I had, I mean, as we all do, I had imposter syndrome, and I was just like, I'll wait. I don't know enough yet. I don't know enough yet. And I wish I hadn't, because the whole purpose of the trainee program is to teach. But I waited, and then eventually when I applied, I got in, and then I slowly worked my way back up from being a trainee all the way back to a first.
And when you said you started and you were pulling focus, do you mean you were literally only pulling focus? You weren't doing like the camera prep and all that stuff?
So I was kind of doing the whole job, but it's a lot less, how to articulate it? It's a lot less structured in the indie world, right? So, and typically, because everyone working in that environment is green, you're kind of making it up as you go, which is the reason I wanted to join the union, because the benefit there is that you get trained on how to do a routine, right? And that's the biggest the thing for me is, like, if you build a routine. Once you're on your either 6th show of the year, day 15, and you're exhausted, your routine will save you from making mistakes, because it becomes muscle memory, right? Like, I might not remember where I put my wrench, but if I put my wrench in the same place every time, it's going to be there every time. You know what I mean?
Ah, interesting. So what kind of stuff are the trainees? Because I know, like, what second AC generally does, but what kind of stuff is the trainee doing?
Depends on how good they are. But so the trainee is essentially the second shadow.
The second shadow.
Yeah.
Not the first.
So
Okay.
So they're basically just learning how to be a second. That's their entire purpose. So if it's someone's first show as a trainee, then typically I will. I'll talk with the second, obviously, because we do communicate about it. But generally, like, depending on the person's comfort level, how nervous they are, because we all remember what our first time on set felt like. It can be nerve-wracking. So depending on their comfort level, for the first couple of days, they might just be running batteries. You know what I mean?
Okay.
They might just be running batteries, and then they might be slating a couple shots. And then
Cool.
every day you just get a little bit more responsibility. And then eventually, hopefully, by the middle of the show, the second is going off to the truck to do some paperwork, and you're running the set as the second.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. What are some of the things that you've seen people? Because, like, one of the big things, like, I love to have this podcast for, is to, like, enlighten people on, like, what they can do better, what they can improve on. So what are some of the things you've seen people do really well at as training? What's some, miscomings and whatnot?
I think that in terms of I'll start with bad first. Well, not bad, just less than great, I suppose.
Okay, less than great, yeah.
I think that, and to a certain extent, I had it too, where if you've worked in the indie world for a little bit, you can sort of kind of come into the union environment thinking, like, I know what I'm doing.
Sure.
And whether or not that's true, it's much better to come in with an attitude of, I'm here to learn. Because that's the benefit of being a trainee, despite the paycheck. You do get paid minimum wage. But the benefit of being a trainee is that you are essentially there. You're allowed to make mistakes, because the whole purpose is to learn. Right?
Yeah.
So not like just coming in with a bit of a humble attitude is usually the best way to go about it. I mean, like anything else in life, I suppose. And then in terms of, like, the better things that I've noticed, it mostly just comes with that drive, right? Like the best trainees are the ones that, like, want to be filmmakers, and they want to be there regardless of how long the day might be, or how long we've been outside in the cold. Because I would much rather work with someone, and this goes, like, even for my seconds. Like, I would much rather work with someone who might not necessarily be as good at the job, but has a great attitude.
Right.
Because there's nothing worse than someone who's fantastic at the AC side of stuff, but is less than great to spend 14 hours with on a day-to-day basis.
Just
right?
the personality
exactly, right?
side of things.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Because it is a very, like, it is in all aspects, not just in the camera department, but it is a very social job, right? So having a people personality is pretty good. Like, it's a good asset, I'd say.
Interesting. Have you worked outside of Ottawa?
So I did a bit of work in Toronto. When I was a trainee, I got placed on a couple of shows there. The biggest show I think I was on when I was a trainee was Suits. When that was still when I was still in there, I did like 3 episodes in season 6, I believe. If I remember correctly. It's been a while. It was fun. It was a much different environment working in a studio because we don't really have studio space in Ottawa.
So that's a set.
It's most of it is a set. Like if they're not outside,
awesome.
and if they're not like, and if you can't see outside, it's usually a set. And their sets are massive. Like all of the the law offices in that show were all built sets.
Yeah. Wow.
So that was really cool.
Studio, by the way.
What's that?
What's this? Do you know the studio? That
if I remember correctly, the studio was Downsview. So it was it was an old like military base, I believe.
Wow.
And they converted it into studio space.
Oh, that's a good use. Yeah, that
It's
makes
great.
a lot of sense.
Yeah, and when we were shooting that, if I'm not mistaken, it was basically 2 shows that had the entirety of the studio. It was Suits and Lone Survivor. So like this, it was like a Kiefer Sutherland show that was shooting in Toronto.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So
Designated Survivor.
Designated Survivor. I just said Lone Survivor.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
I'm gonna lose my
Sounds kind of cool though, to be honest.
I'm gonna lose my union card. But yeah, so and that was a really cool experience because just the pace. Like I'm used to like lower budget shows, so the pace on a higher budget show is a bit slower because they have more time.
Oh.
Yeah, because I mean, so the thing is,
I would think it would be the opposite.
No, because the less money you have, the less days you have, right?
That is very true.
Yeah.
We've experienced that.
Well aware.
Yeah.
So more has to be shot with less time.
Right.
So the difference between going from the schedule of like a 15-day Christmas show, for example, going to like Suits is. They have like months. They have months that they can spend shooting stuff, right?
Yeah.
And even just simply doing like a turnaround, it's like, we shoot one side of a scene, the camera needs to turn around, but they have to blow away an entire wall to do that. So it's like 20-minute wait to turn around because they have to literally remove a wall.
Right.
And then put it back after, right? So stuff like that. And just the like getting used to that, like not feeling like there's never enough time to do things.
Wow.
And get used to the fact that there is time to get the stuff you need is really cool.
I would love to experience that once. Can you talk about, like, since it sounds like you have some experience on TV versus movies. Can you talk about the difference in the approach? I guess I don't know if there's a big difference for the first AC.
For the first AC, there really isn't.
No? Okay.
The job is pretty similar. I mean, aside from the time aspect again, there's typically more time. Again, I don't want to overgeneralize, but there's typically more time on bigger TV shows because there's usually more money. But in terms of like on set, there isn't that much of a difference. On a TV show, on a bigger TV show, like the director will swap out a lot, so like that will affect how like we change our slate and stuff like that.
Right.
But I don't know too much about like I've done more like low budget movies than I've done like high budget TV. So I'm not too sure where the bigger differences would be in that.
Do you think that doing the low budget stuff and the fast paced way of working helps you more than let's say you were just doing those big TV shows and you had
all the time in the world
and whatnot.
Yeah, in terms of my job, yes. In terms of my blood pressure, but no, it definitely does. Because I came up in indie movies, so like that is the lack of time made worse.
Yeah.
It definitely made me become a better focus puller faster.
Yeah.
With less toys. Less time, less ability to get marks. I am a focus puller that definitely trusts his monitor a little bit more than someone who came up in like in the film time.
Sure.
I definitely still like get my distance marks when I need it and stuff, but I'm more used to just kind of winging it and nailing it. As opposed to like taking my time and like getting my marks and stuff, which it's a different way to work. And some would say that it's probably not the right way to do it. But you do what you can with the time you have. So
for sure.
Speaking of film, have you ever been on a set that was shooting on film?
Yes.
Okay.
So once.
Yeah.
It was a great experience. I learned a lot. The only problem with that show was that it was a low budget show that it was originally supposed to be shot digitally, but then last minute the decision was made to shoot on film.
Wow.
Yes,
That's a big decision.
it was, and but nothing really else changed about the way that we shot it. So the I'd say that the downside of that show was that it was a film shot on 35, but shot like we were doing digital.
Can you talk about the difference?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I was a second at the time, thankfully, because I would have not enjoyed having Cole on that show. But I mean, so for example, one of the things that kind of needs to come with when you're shooting on 35 is slowing down. Like it is a slower medium by its very nature, right? And but when the set itself is running as if it's digital, like for example, if we're shooting on an LF Mini and I'm running out of card space, I'll call for a reload. And that takes the amount of time it takes to take the SSD card out and replace it with a new one.
Yeah.
A minute at most. Maybe a little bit more if I'm letting my second do paperwork. With film, switching the mag on film is a lot more of an involved process, of course. When people are still expecting the job to be done as fast as it is on digital, it creates a lot of problems, right? But then also too, because film is a little bit more of a finickier medium. So, and I'll give you an example specifically with the reload. Like there was a day we were outside, it was starting to get cold. And we all know how cold it gets in Ottawa. So
that was in Ottawa?
It was in Ottawa, yeah.
Wait, this was in the winter?
This was at the start of the winter. So it was like mid-November.
Oh my God.
And that posed a lot of issues too. Yeah. But so it was starting to get cold, and we were doing car scenes with car rigs with these 35mm cameras. And the scene that we were shooting was 7 minutes, which is roughly the size of one mag when you're shooting on film.
The one scene was 7. Oh, with the cuts and everything.
Yeah, but we weren't cutting, because why would you cut? So we would do one take or maybe like 1.5 takes, and the cameras would roll out. We'd have to stop and reload. So we park the cars. I get out. I run to get a new mag, bring it over, pull it out. And so the process is the second pulls the mag out of the box, pulls a little bit of the film out so that you can put it on the camera, and then the first can grab the loop into the camera and like get the film in the right spot, close it, and then you can start filming again.
And this is in the dark, right?
No, this part can be done anywhere, because the only part of the film that's getting exposed is essentially like it's meant to be exposed, because it's the same way that when you're loading like a 35mm still camera, you're exposing that first little bit of the slide.
You gotta get it on there.
You gotta get it on there.
Okay.
So I bring it over, and I'm like doing the whole thing. As I'm pulling it out, it's cold, mind you, remember? So the film is cold. So as I pull that loop out, it snaps.
Oh my God.
So now this whole mag has to be sent back to the truck to be reloaded. And I have to go get another one.
Wow.
Right? So, and that turns what would normally be a minute or so digitally into a 3 to 5 minute process.
Is that mag gone now? Like it's
No, so basically what happens now is, because that loop has broken, you have to, in the dark room, open it up and
that's where it's dark.
And re-put it back. Yeah, you have a dark, so the camera truck has a dark room, and that's where you do all your loading in the complete dark.
Wow, that is
that is a
I'm
crazy
so used
process.
to, you know what I mean? Just either the SSDs or like the black magic with the T5s and stuff.
Well, and that's the other thing too, right? And even just in terms of, I mean, obviously, like, costs are a whole other thing, but you go from as I was saying, I was a second at the time, so I went from having my onset bag with all the stuff in it that I normally have. And usually I have maybe like 4 SSDs in my bag.
Sure.
For the camera. Excuse me. I'm going to burp.
All good.
Apologies. And so, and I have 4 cards, and that will last me a day. You know what I mean? Like, to then having like a full camera card with maybe 14 minutes of film on it.
That is just crazy.
Right? So
my God.
That's the bigger difference.
Okay,
there.
but that was you learning, coming up, you're second. Would you be excited to do it now?
I would be. It would be it would be great for the job, awful for my blood pressure. But no, it would be great. And I mean, obviously there are still aesthetic reasons to shoot on film, and
Of course, yeah.
there are a lot of advantages to shooting on film, especially if you're talking about like, IMAX and all that. There are reasons that people do it. Yeah. But the key difference being, if you're going to shoot on film, have the budget to shoot on film, because otherwise you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot as a production. Because it's a lot more time consuming. A lot more mistakes can be made if you're not taking the time. If I remember correctly, at one point, like a whole scene that we shot got scratched. And so it didn't destroy the scene, but that needed to then be fixed in post. So you have a whole scene that's being fixed now because the negative was scratched.
Like, you mean literally scratched?
Yes.
Physical
damage
to your footage.
Yeah. To a whole
Crazy.
scene. To a whole scene.
That's insane.
Yeah.
We can't have a first AC on here without talking a little bit more about gear.
Sure, of course.
As well. Could you talk about some of your favorite camera packages that you've rigged up?
Well, I'm a pretty
Digital.
Yeah.
We'll switch.
Thanks.
Switch. Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty simple. Like, I'm a big fan of, especially now using the LF Mini. I'm a big fan.
Sure.
The large format is beautiful, and it makes my job a little bit harder because the bigger the format, the more shallow the depth of field is. Right. But it's a lot of fun to use, and I'm a big fan of basically anything that RE makes. I was a huge fan. My favorite follow focus system was the WCU4 before the High 5 came out, and the High 5 is incredible.
You're using that now?
So I've gotten to use it once. I used it on my last show, and it is a very impressive piece of kit. And I think, like, aside from just the typical, like, when I spin the knob, it does what it's supposed to do, which cheaper remotes don't even do that. But it's the quality of life improvements that they put into it, because they were speaking to ACs and actually asking for, what do you need? And I think one of my favorite features that is really just a luxury is the tail slate feature. The fact that I can literally just hold the record button and it will know that I'm tail slating is great, because there's so many times as a first when you're halfway through the show and you're getting tired and a tail slate is called and you forget and you cut the camera before the tail slate goes up there. So small stuff like that. And the fact that it's lightweight, it's easy to use. I can wear it all day and not get tired. I can strap a monitor onto it easily and run around with it. It's fantastic.
Awesome. What about in terms of like lenses? I guess the director of photography is choosing the lenses, but are there any specific lenses that you prefer versus others?
The more expensive, the better. Typically, I've used the Sigma primes quite a bit.
Those are class. The frame primes.
Yeah, exactly. They're great. Obviously, I like anything that Zeiss makes. And but it honestly, like, I think much like, I like all gear, and I think that it's really dependent on the job, right? There's always the right camera and the right lens for the job, and sometimes, like, it's the older glass that looks a bit weirder. That's the right pick for whatever the job is, right? For me specifically, though, I think one of the things that I like is any set of lenses that is relatively built the same. In terms of, like, where that focus wheel is, where the iris is, how much they weigh, because the way that productions, specifically like the tier of productions that I usually work, because we are, as I said, always hurting for time, it's really nice to be able to build my camera in a way where I have the most flexibility. I can go from the studio mode to a steady cam to a
studio
crane.
mode is sticks, right?
Or dolly.
Okay.
Yeah, or dolly. And that's typically like the biggest the camera ever is.
Yeah.
And then you're stripping it down for the other stuff to make it a little bit lighter. And I want to have the least, or if I can, I want to be able to make that transition from one to the other as fast as possible, so that I'm not, I'm as efficient as possible, but so that, like, we're not slowing the day down for me to, take off a piece of gear that I don't actually need. I just have it there for fun. You know what I mean?
Yes, very true.
Are there specific shots that you've done that were the most complex for you that you recall? Like that was
Like in terms of like for pulling focus.
yes.
So anything with a mirror.
Okay.
Anything with a mirror, anything with a mirror is awful. So the way that it works is if you're pointing into a mirror, if your subject is, let's just say like you're shooting someone who is doing their makeup, for example, in this awful movie that I just made up in my head. And so you're pointing at the mirror. You have to, as a focus puller, you have to measure from the film plane or the sensor to the mirror and then back to your subject, because the mirror itself has depth.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's all well and good if it's a static shot, easy. You just find it and you have it. But the second you start moving that camera,
Ooh.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that.
yeah,
Right.
it becomes a lot more intricate, and at that point, it becomes math.
Yeah.
And so if you're doing that like on a tight lens, on a dolly, and let's say your subject's moving towards the mirror, that's like 40 chess that's very hard to play.
T1.5.
It always.
Oh,
And that's actually something else too, that is an important consideration as well, is that the difference between film and digital is that now focus pullers actually have it harder, because back in the film days, and again, I'm not speaking for everyone, but back in the film days, your stops were a little bit closer to like a T4, maybe a 5.6. You'd be wide, like, I mean, if you were, the focus puller on Barry Lyndon, you're shooting at 0.9.
Yeah.
I don't know how he did that without pulling his brains
That
out.
was
but,
crazy.
Right? But you had a little bit more of a stop. Now, typically, I find, most of the shows that I've done, I'm shooting at like a 2.8 at best.
Best being
Like the most closed down. Otherwise, I'm like wide open.
yeah, because it's Boca Central now.
Oh, and honestly, like,
just-
and that's the thing. It's like, as a focus puller, I'm torn because, at 1.5, my job is a lot harder. But goddamn, it
just-
looks nice. It looks nice. It looks amazing, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's kind of the distinction there, is that we are typically working, and we also have larger formats now too. In the digital world, not necessarily larger than film, but we are like my last 6 movies have all been on the LF Mini, so I'm working typically on a larger format, wide open, and I don't have the time to get marks like they used to in the film days.
Right, just that monitor is.
Just monitor and get it on the first or second take.
Wow.
Yeah, that is a lot. Do you find is there any difficulties with like, I know because like the Sigma primes, the full frame primes, those are sharp, very sharp lenses. Is it more difficult on like vintage or like anamorphic glass to pull focus?
I mean, the difficulty is in whatever the shot requires, right? If you're shooting vintage lenses and they're softer, then it's like, you in prep, you're figuring out where that sweet spot is, right? And you're trying to hit that. The trickier thing with older lenses, or maybe lenses that haven't been cared for as well as well as you want. I remember one show where depending on the stop that you were at, the focus would line up in 3 different spots. So if you were a wide open, it would be 1. If you were like a 2, it would be something else, and if you were at a 2, it'd be something else. And it's simply because the lenses hadn't been maintenance or serviced or anything like that, and we didn't have time to send them back. We weren't able to get replacements.
Oh boy.
We just kind of made it work, and it was as simple as like just taping 3 different little arrows to
Like different colors.
to the lens, and being like, when you're at a 2, hit this mark. And in that situation, at least for me, I'm mostly just getting the distance, but also just really relying on my monitor then.
Right. Makes sense. Favorite monitor? Last tech question.
I would say the small HD 703. It's
703. Oh yeah.
It's fantastic. It's bright enough to burn your eyeballs out if you forget to turn the brightness down, and you can use it in broad daylight, and you're still like tack sharp. And also, it doesn't ghost in the cold, which when you're shooting in Canada in the middle of the winter, overnight in minus 40 degrees weather, ghosting is the bane of your existence.
Ghosting? What's ghosting?
So as a monitor gets colder, the image will actually ghost.
Oh, like with the moisture, because
it's just because it's getting cold, so it's a product of like, it just happens on certain monitors, and so like if you're tracking someone and you're watching them walk, you'll actually see like an after image of them.
Like with the mouse on.
Exactly.
Oh my god! Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So when you're trying to keep someone in focus and there's like 6 of them, it becomes a little bit of a guesswork at that point.
Yeah.
Well, we could talk about tech forever, but what advice would you give to somebody who's looking to become first AC? Like, what would you tell them to look out for, and what direction would you go in terms of networking and things like that?
So I'd say like a really good first step is to go on. So my union local is IATSE 667. Okay. So my first step would be go on their site. They actually have like a full detailed PDF about like all the steps about how to apply to the training program. Yeah, it's very, very open.
Okay.
And then another thing to do would just be if you're in Ottawa specifically, or if you're anywhere that there is productions happening, just get in touch with the production company. You know what I mean? Like they might not be able to put you in camera specifically, but they can maybe get you on set working in another department, right? And just by virtue of being there, you instantly become you're on the radar, right? And if you talk to like camera, like we always want more people, right? So if someone is gung ho about something and about specifically being in camera, like we'll help in any way we can. And then specifically in terms of like specific advice tailored more to the job, pick up a camera, any sort of camera, understand how it works, understand the importance of, what an aperture does and what a shutter speed does, and even what a frame rate does. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
And just that's a great first step. And yeah, just I think the biggest thing is just being in the right environment, like being around the right people, being around creatives. And I think Ottawa is becoming. This is a really good example. It's just I think Ottawa is becoming a much easier place to get in than it has been in a very long time.
Awesome. That's really solid advice. Actually, that's fantastic. So I think at that we'll wrap it up. Unless you have anything else?
No, I do not.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for having me on, guys. It was fun.
No, thank you.
So this has been another episode of the Industry Talks podcast with Jelan Maxwell and Fitch Jean. And Diego.
Thanks so much.
What was your last name?
Diaz.
Diego Diaz. So thanks everybody for watching. Follow us on Instagram at the Indie Talks Podcast. At Indie Talks Pod, actually. I'm getting the name wrong myself here. And tune in next time for another special guest.
All right.
Thank you.